Welcome to The Woman Who Outsmarted Sherlock Holmes, a Scandal in Bohemia. You're about to experience the full, uninterrupted audiobook of one of Arthur Conan Doyle's most iconic cases, featuring the brilliant Irene Adler. From the very first moments, you'll be immersed in the opulent world of Victorian London, where the King of Bohemia himself seeks Holmes's help in a delicate matter concerning a scandalous photograph and a captivating woman. But this isn't just any mystery. It's the one time the legendary detective met his intellectual match. What secret does Irene Adler hold that could threaten a royal marriage? And how does she manage to outwit the man who seemingly never fails? Get ready to relax and let the calming red visuals and soothing narration guide you through this timeless tale, specifically designed to help you unwind and even drift off to sleep. You won't just hear a story. You'll embark on a journey that reveals a unique side of Sherlock Holmes. Like this video, leave a comment about your favorite Holmes mystery, and subscribe for more classic audiobooks designed for relaxation and sleep. A Scandal in Bohemia. Chapter 1. To Sherlock Holmes, she is always the woman. I have seldom heard him mention her by any other name. In his eyes, she eclipses and predominates all other women. It wasn't that he felt any emotion akin to love for Irene Adler. All emotions, particularly that one, were abhorrent to his cold, precise, but admirably balanced mind. He was, I take it, the most perfect reasoning and observing machine the world has seen. As a lover, he would have placed himself in a false position. He never spoke of the softer passions, except with a jibe and a sneer. He considered them admirable for an observer, excellent for revealing men's motives and actions. But for a trained reasoner to admit such intrusions into his own delicate and finely adjusted temperament was to introduce a distracting factor. It might cast doubt upon all his mental results. Grit in a sensitive instrument, or a crack in one of his high-power lenses, would not be more disturbing than a strong emotion in a nature such as his. And yet, there was only one woman to him, and that woman was the late Irene Adler, of dubious and questionable memory. I have seen little of Holmes lately. My marriage had drifted us apart. My own complete happiness, and the home-centered interests that arise around a man who first finds himself master of his own establishment, were sufficient to absorb all my attention. Meanwhile, Holmes, who loathed every form of society with his whole Bohemian soul, remained in our lodgings in Baker Street. He was buried among his old books, alternating from week to week between cocaine and ambition, the drowsiness of the drug and the fierce energy of his keen nature. He was still, as ever, deeply attracted by the study of crime. He occupied his immense faculties and extraordinary powers of observation in following clues and clearing up mysteries that the official police had abandoned as hopeless. From time to time I heard vague accounts of his doings: his summons to Odessa in the Trepoff murder case, his clearing up of the singular tragedy of the Atkinson brothers at Trincomalee, and finally the mission he had accomplished so delicately and successfully for the reigning family of Holland. Beyond these signs of his activity, however, which I merely shared with all readers of the daily press, I knew little of my former friend and companion. One night, it was the 20th of March, 1888, I was returning from a journey to a patient. I had now returned to civil practice, and my way led me through Baker Street. As I passed the well-remembered door, which must always be associated in my mind with my wooing and with the dark incidents of a study in scarlet, I was seized with a keen desire to see Holmes again. I wanted to know how he was employing his extraordinary powers. His rooms were brilliantly lit, and even as I looked up, I saw his tall, spare figure pass twice in a dark silhouette against the blind. He was pacing the room swiftly, eagerly, with his head sunk upon his chest and his hands clasped behind him. To me, who knew his every mood and habit, his attitude and manner told their own story. He was at work again. He had risen out of his drug-created dreams and was hot upon the scent of some new problem. I rang the bell and was shown up to the chamber which had formerly been, in part, my own. His manner was not effusive. It seldom was. But he was glad, I think, to see me. With hardly a word spoken, but with a kindly eye, he waved me to an armchair. He threw across his case of cigars and indicated a spirit case and a gasogene in the corner. Then he stood before the fire and looked me over in his singular, introspective fashion. "Wedlock suits you," he remarked. "I think, Watson, that you have put on 7.5 pounds since I saw you." "7," I answered. "Indeed, I should have thought a little more. Just a trifle more, I fancy, Watson. And in practice again, I observe. You did not tell me that you intended to go into harness. Then, how do you know? I see it. I deduce it. How do I know that you have been getting yourself very wet lately, and that you have a most clumsy and careless servant girl?" "My dear Holmes," I said, "this is too much. You would certainly have been burned, had you lived a few centuries ago. It is true that I had a country walk on Thursday, and came home in a dreadful mess. But as I have changed my clothes, I can't imagine how you deduce it. As to Mary Jane, she is incorrigible, and my wife has given her notice. But there, again, I fail to see how you work it out." He chuckled to himself and rubbed his long, nervous hands together. "It is simplicity itself," he said. "My eyes tell me that on the inside of your left shoe, just where the firelight strikes it, the leather is scored by 6 almost parallel cuts. Obviously, they have been caused by someone who has very carelessly scraped around the edges of the sole to remove crusted mud from it. Hence, you see, my double deduction, that you had been out in vile weather, and that you had a particularly malignant, boot-slitting specimen of the London slavey. As to your practice, if a gentleman walks into my rooms smelling of iodoform, with a black mark of nitrate of silver upon his right forefinger, and a bulge on the right side of his top hat to show where he has secreted his stethoscope, I must be dull, indeed, if I do not pronounce him to be an active member of the medical profession." I could not help laughing at the ease with which he explained his process of deduction. "When I hear you give your reasons," I remarked, "the thing always appears to me to be so ridiculously simple that I could easily do it myself. Though, at each successive instance of your reasoning, I am baffled until you explain your process. And yet, I believe that my eyes are as good as yours." "Quite so," he answered, lighting a cigarette and throwing himself down into an armchair. "You see, but you do not observe. The distinction is clear. For example, you have frequently seen the steps which lead up from the hall to this room." "Frequently? How often?" "Well, some hundreds of times." "Then how many are there?" "How many? I don't know." "Quite so. You have not observed, and yet you have seen. That is just my point. Now, I know that there are 17 steps, because I have both seen and observed. By the way, since you are interested in these little problems, and since you are good enough to chronicle 1 or 2 of my trifling experiences, you may be interested in this." He threw over a sheet of thick, pink-tinted notepaper which had been lying open upon the table. "It came by the last post," he said. "Read it aloud." The note was undated, and without either signature or address. "They will call upon you tonight at 7:45, it said, "a gentleman who desires to consult you upon a matter of the very deepest moment. Your recent services to one of the royal houses of Europe have shown that you are one who may safely be trusted with matters of an importance that can hardly be exaggerated. This account of you we have received from all quarters. Be in your chamber then at that hour, and do not take it amiss if your visitor wears a mask." "This is indeed a mystery," I remarked. "What do you imagine that it means?" "I have no data yet. It is a capital mistake to theorize before one has data. Insensibly, one begins to twist facts to suit theories, instead of theories to suit facts. But the note itself, what do you deduce from it? I carefully examined the writing and the paper upon which it was written. The man who wrote it was presumably well-to-do, I remarked, endeavouring to imitate my companion's processes. Such paper could not be bought for under £0.50 a packet. It is peculiarly strong and stiff. Peculiar, that is the very word, said Holmes. It is not an English paper at all. Hold it up to the light. I did so, and saw a large E with a small g, AP, and a large G with a small t, woven into the texture of the paper. What do you make of that? Asked Holmes. The name of the maker, no doubt, or his monogram, rather. Not at all. The G, with the small t, stands for Gesellschaft, which is German for company. It is a customary contraction like our co. P, of course, stands for paupier. Now for the E.G. Let us glance at our Continental Gazetteer. He took down a heavy brown volume from his shelves. Iglo, Eglanitz. Here we are, Igria. It is in a German-speaking country, in Bohemia, not far from Carlsbad, remarkable as being the scene of the death of Wallenstein, and for its numerous glass factories and paper mills. Ha, ha, my boy, what do you make of that? His eyes sparkled, and he sent up a great blue triumphant cloud from his cigarette. The paper was made in Bohemia, I said. Precisely. And the man who wrote the note is a German. Do you note the peculiar construction of the sentence? This account of you we have from all quarters received. A Frenchman or Russian could not have written that. It is the German who is so uncourteous to his verbs. It only remains, therefore, to discover what is wanted by this German, who writes upon Bohemian paper and prefers wearing a mask to showing his face. And here he comes, if I am not mistaken, to resolve all our doubts. As he spoke, there was the sharp sound of horses' hoofs and grating wheels against the curb, followed by a sharp pull at the bell. Holmes whistled. A pair by the sound, he said. Yes, he continued, glancing out of the window. A nice little brougham and a pair of beauties. 150 guineas apiece. There's money in this case, Watson, if there is nothing else. I think that I had better go, Holmes. Not a bit, Doctor. Stay where you are. I am lost without my Boswell, and this promises to be interesting. It would be a pity to miss it. But your client, never mind him. I may want your help, and so may he. Here he comes. Sit down in that armchair, Doctor, and give us your best attention. A slow and heavy step, which had been heard upon the stairs and in the passage, paused immediately outside the door. Then there was a loud and authoritative tap. "Come in," said Holmes. A man entered who could hardly have been less than 6 feet 6 inches in height, with the chest and limbs of a Hercules. His dress was rich with a richness that would, in England, be looked upon as akin to bad taste. Heavy bands of astrakhan were slashed across the sleeves and fronts of his double-breasted coat. The deep blue cloak thrown over his shoulders was lined with flame-coloured silk and secured at the neck with a brooch consisting of a single flaming beryl. Boots that extended halfway up his calves, trimmed at the tops with rich brown fur, completed the impression of barbaric opulence suggested by his whole appearance. He carried a broad-brimmed hat in his hand, while he wore across the upper part of his face, extending down past the cheekbones, a black vizard mask. He had apparently adjusted it that very moment, for his hand was still raised to it as he entered. From the lower part of his face, he appeared to be a man of strong character, with a thick, hanging lip, and a long, straight chin suggestive of resolution pushed to the length of obstinacy. "You had my note?" he asked with a deep, harsh voice and a strongly marked German accent. "I told you that I would call." He looked from one to the other of us, as if uncertain which to address. "Pray take a seat," said Holmes. This is my friend and colleague, Dr. Watson, who is occasionally good enough to help me in my cases. Whom have I the honor to address? You may address me as the Count von Cram, a Bohemian nobleman. I understand that this gentleman, your friend, is a man of honor and discretion, whom I may trust with a matter of the most extreme importance. If not, I would much prefer to communicate with you alone. I rose to go, but Holmes caught me by the wrist and pushed me back into my chair. "It is both or none," he said. "You may say before this gentleman anything which you may say to me." The Count shrugged his broad shoulders. "Then I must begin," he said, "by binding you both to absolute secrecy for 2 years. At the end of that time, the matter will be of no importance. At present, it is not too much to say that it is of such weight it may have an influence upon European history." "I promise," said Holmes. "And I. You will excuse this mask," continued our strange visitor. "The august person who employs me wishes his agent to be unknown to you, and I may confess at once that the title by which I have just called myself is not exactly my own." "I was aware of it," said Holmes dryly. "The circumstances are of great delicacy, and every precaution has to be taken to quench what might grow to be an immense scandal and seriously compromise one of the reigning families of Europe. To speak plainly, the matter implicates the great house of Ormstein, hereditary kings of Bohemia." "I was also aware of that," murmured Holmes, settling himself down in his armchair and closing his eyes. Our visitor glanced with some apparent surprise at the languid, lounging figure of the man who had, no doubt, been depicted to him as the most incisive reasoner and most energetic agent in Europe. Holmes slowly reopened his eyes and looked impatiently at his gigantic client. "If your Majesty would condescend to state your case," he remarked, "I should be better able to advise you." The man sprang from his chair and paced up and down the room in uncontrollable agitation. Then, with a gesture of desperation, he tore the mask from his face and hurled it upon the ground. "You are right," he cried. "I am the king. Why should I attempt to conceal it?" "Why, indeed?" murmured Holmes. "Your Majesty had not spoken before I was aware that I was addressing Wilhelm Gottsreich Sigismund von Ormstein, Grand Duke of Cassel-Felstein, and hereditary King of Bohemia. But you can understand," said our strange visitor, sitting down once more and passing his hand over his high white forehead, "you can understand that I am not accustomed to doing such business in my own person. Yet the matter was so delicate that I could not confide it to an agent without putting myself in his power. I have come to Prague for the purpose of consulting you." "Then pray consult," said Holmes, shutting his eyes once more. "The facts are briefly these. Some 5 years ago, during a lengthy visit to Warsaw, I made the acquaintance of the well-known adventuress Irene Adler. The name is no doubt familiar to you." "Kindly look her up in my index, Doctor," murmured Holmes without opening his eyes. For many years he had adopted a system of docketing all paragraphs concerning men and things, so that it was difficult to name a subject or a person on which he could not at once furnish information. In this case, I found her biography sandwiched in between that of a Hebrew rabbi and that of a staff commander who had written a monograph upon deep-sea fishes. "Let me see," said Holmes. Born in New Jersey in the year 1858. Contralto, La Scala, Prima donna Imperial Opera of Warsaw. Yes. Retired from operatic stage. Living in London. Quite so. Your Majesty, as I understand, became entangled with this young person, wrote her some compromising letters, and is now desirous of getting those letters back. Precisely so. But how? Was there a secret marriage? None. No legal papers or certificates? None. Then I fail to follow your Majesty. If this young person should produce her letters for blackmailing or other purposes, how is she to prove their authenticity? There is the writing. Pooh, pooh. Forgery. My private note-paper. Stolen. My own seal. Imitated. My photograph. Bought. We were both in the photograph. Oh dear. That is very bad. Your Majesty has indeed committed an indiscretion. I was mad, insane. You have compromised yourself seriously. I was only Crown Prince then. I was young. I am 30 now. It must be recovered. We have tried and failed. Your Majesty must pay. It must be bought. She will not sell. Stolen, then. 5 attempts have been made. Twice, burglars in my pay ransacked her house. Once, we diverted her luggage when she travelled. Twice, she has been waylaid. There has been no result. No sign of it. Absolutely none. Holmes laughed. It is quite a pretty little problem, he said. But a very serious one to me, returned the king reproachfully. Very, indeed. And what does she propose to do with the photograph? To ruin me. But how? I am about to be married. So I have heard. To Clotilde Lothman von Saxe-Meiningen, second daughter of the King of Scandinavia. You may know the strict principles of her family. She is herself the very soul of delicacy. A shadow of a doubt as to my conduct would bring the matter to an end. And Irene Adler threatens to send them the photograph. And she will do it. I know that she will do it. You do not know her, but she has a soul of steel. She has the face of the most beautiful of women, and the mind of the most resolute of men. Rather than I should marry another woman, there are no lengths to which she would not go, none. You are sure that she has not sent it yet? I am sure. And why? Because she has said that she would send it on the day when the betrothal was publicly proclaimed. That will be next Monday. Oh, then we have 3 days yet, said Holmes with a yawn. That is very fortunate, as I have 1 or 2 matters of importance to look into just at present. Your Majesty will, of course, stay in London for the present. Certainly. You will find me at the Langham under the name of Count von Cram. Then I shall drop you a line to let you know how we progress. Pray do so. I shall be all anxious. Then, as to money, you have carte blanche. Absolutely. I tell you that I would give one of the provinces of my kingdom to have that photograph. And for present expenses? The king took a heavy chamois leather bag from under his cloak and laid it on the table. There are £300 in gold and 700 in notes, he said. Holmes scribbled a receipt upon a sheet of his notebook and handed it to him. And mademoiselle's address, he asked, is Briony Lodge, Serpentine Avenue, St. John's Wood. Holmes took a note of it. One other question, he said. Was the photograph a cabinet? It was. Then good night, Your Majesty, and I trust that we shall soon have some good news for you. And good night, Watson, he added, as the wheels of the royal brougham rolled down the street. If you will be good enough to call tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock, I would like to chat this little matter over with you. Chapter 2. At exactly 3 o'clock, I arrived at Baker Street, only to find that Holmes was not yet home. The landlady told me he had gone out just after 8 that morning. Still, I settled by the fire, determined to wait for him no matter how long it took. My interest in his case was deepening, though it lacked the grim and strange features of the 2 crimes I'd previously chronicled. Something about the matter, and the high rank of his client, gave it its own character. Even apart from its specifics, I found it a pleasure to observe Holmes's mastery in approaching any problem, and his swift, piercing logic that untangled even the most bewildering mysteries. So certain was I of his inevitable success that I never considered the possibility of his failure. It was almost 4 when the door finally opened. In walked what looked to be a drunken, wild groom, hair unkempt, whiskers at his cheeks, his face red and his clothes disreputable. Accustomed to my friend's extraordinary skill in disguise, I had to stare 3 times before recognizing Holmes himself. With only a nod, he vanished into the bedroom and came out moments later in familiar tweed and a respectable air. He lounged before the fire and laughed so heartily that he had to lie back in the chair, helpless with amusement. "Well, really," he exclaimed, then struggled to contain another peal of laughter. "What is it?" I asked, unable to hide my curiosity. "It's too funny. You'd never guess how I spent my morning, or what I ended up doing." "I can't imagine. I suppose you've been watching the habits, and perhaps even the house, of Miss Irene Adler." "Exactly. But events took an unusual turn, which I'll share. I left here just after 8, disguised as a groom looking for work. Horsemen have a kind of secret kinship. Become one of them, and every secret is yours. I quickly found Bryony Lodge, a charming villa with a garden at the back, but built close up to the road. Chubb lock on the door. Large sitting room on the right, well furnished, with long windows nearly to the floor. Those ridiculous English window clasps that a child could open. The passage window in the back can be reached from the top of the coach-house. I walked around, inspecting every angle, but saw nothing else of much interest. I strolled down the street and, as I expected, found a mews running close to the garden wall. I helped the ostlers rub down their horses, earning myself 2 pence, a glass of half and half, a pair of fills of tobacco, and plenty of gossip about Miss Adler, along with biographies of several other neighbours I did not care to hear. "And what did you learn about Irene Adler?" I asked. "All the men in that area are utterly smitten. She's the most charming lady under a bonnet, or so they say. She lives quietly, sings at concerts, goes driving at 5 and returns at 7 sharp for dinner. She rarely ventures out except to sing. She has only one regular male visitor, a dark, handsome, dashing man named Godfrey Norton, of the Inner Temple. Cabmen have carried him home a dozen times and know everything about him. After listening to all they'd share, I walked near Bryony Lodge again and considered my next move. Godfrey Norton is clearly significant. He's a lawyer. Ominous. Are he and Adler client and lawyer, friends, or something more? If he's simply her lawyer, the photograph may already be in his care. If more than that, perhaps not. The answer would steer my investigation either to Bryony Lodge or to the gentleman's chambers at the Temple. It's a delicate point and broadened my inquiry. Forgive the details, but you must see my difficulties to understand the case. "I'm following closely," I assured him. I was still pondering it when a hansom cab drew up outside Bryony Lodge. Out leapt a strikingly handsome man, dark-haired, aquiline, and with a moustache, just as described. He seemed flustered, told the cabman to wait, and entered with a familiarity that showed he was at home there. He remained inside for half an hour, occasionally glimpsing pacing the sitting-room with flurried excitement and gesticulating as he talked. Adler herself never appeared. Soon the man emerged, more hurried than before. He checked his watch, then shouted to the cabman, "Drive like the devil, first to Gross and Hankey's in Regent Street, then to the Church of St. Monica on Edgware Road. Half a guinea if you do it in 20 minutes. Off they raced, and I was debating whether to follow when up the lane came a neat little landau, its coachman's coat half-buttoned and his harness askew. Adler hurried from the house, lovely in a way that could break a man's heart, and called out, "The Church of St. Monica, John. Half a sovereign if you reach it in 20 minutes. This was an opportunity too good to miss. Unsure whether to run or to ride, I flagged down another cab and told the driver, "The Church of St. Monica, and half a sovereign if you reach it in 20 minutes. It was 25 to 12, so the rush made things clear. My cabby drove at full speed, yet we arrived only after the others. The cab and landau stood steaming at the door. Inside, only Norton, Adler, and a clergyman were present, gathered at the altar in animated debate. I drifted along the aisle as inconspicuously as any idle visitor, when suddenly the trio turned to me. Norton ran over, exclaiming, "Thank God, you'll do. Come. Only 3 minutes, or it's not legal." I was half-dragged to the altar, answering whispered questions and unwittingly serving as witness for the sudden marriage of Irene Adler to Godfrey Norton. It was over in an instant, and both the bride and groom thanked me warmly. The clergyman beamed, and I was left in the most ridiculous position I'd ever known. Apparently, some paperwork issue required a witness, and my timely appearance saved them from seeking a stranger on the street. Adler pressed a sovereign into my hand, and I intend to keep it as a memento. "This is an unexpected turn," I said. "And what next?" They could leave at any moment, meaning my plans were in jeopardy. At the church door, however, they separated. He returned to the temple, she to her home. "I'll drive in the park at 5 as usual," she said as she departed. That was all. Each went their own way, and I hurried off to make arrangements. "And those are—" "A bit of cold beef and a glass of beer," Holmes replied, ringing for the landlady. "I haven't eaten all day, and may be busier still tonight. By the way, Doctor, I'll need your help." "I'd be glad to assist. You don't mind bending the law?" "Not for a good cause." "Nor risking arrest?" "Not at all." "The cause is noble." "Then I'm your man. I knew I could rely on you. But what exactly do you need?" "I'll explain when Mrs. Turner brings in the tray." "Now," he said, turning his attention to the simple meal she set before him, "we must discuss the plan while I eat. It's nearly 5. We have 2 hours until we act. Madam rather, returns from her drive at 7. We must be at Briony Lodge before then. And then, you must trust me. Everything is arranged. Only one thing. You must not interfere, no matter what happens. Do you understand? Am I to remain neutral? Do nothing at all. There may be some minor trouble. Don't get involved. Soon after, I'll be carried into the house. A few minutes later, the sitting-room window will open. You must stay close by. Yes. Watch for me. I'll be visible. Yes. When I raise my hand, so, you'll throw in what I give you and raise the cry of fire. Are you clear? Perfectly. It's simple, he said, producing a cigar-shaped object. Just a plumber's smoke rocket, easy to light. You simply throw it in at the signal and shout, "Fire!" Others will join in. Then you walk to the end of the street, and I'll find you in 10 minutes. Have I made myself clear? I'm to remain neutral, go to the window, watch you, throw the smoke rocket at your signal, call "Fire!" and wait at the street's corner. Exactly. Then you can count on me. Excellent. Now, I should prepare for the role I'll play. He disappeared and returned dressed as a kind-hearted, absent-minded clergyman. Broad black hat, baggy trousers, white tie, and an air of benevolent curiosity. Holmes didn't just change costumes. His entire demeanour transformed. The stage lost a great actor when he turned to detective work. At 6:15, we left Baker Street. 10 minutes before the hour, we arrived at Serpentine Avenue. The evening was falling, the lamps lit as we paced in front of Briony Lodge, awaiting its occupant. The house matched Holmes's description exactly, yet the area was livelier than expected. Groups of ragged men chatted in a corner, a scissors grinder worked his wheel, guardsmen flirted with a nurse, while well-dressed youths strolled with cigars. "This marriage simplifies things," Holmes remarked. "The photograph is now a weapon against both parties." She'll want to keep it from Norton as much as our client wants it from his princess. Where is it hidden? Where, indeed? It's unlikely she carries it, cabinet size, too large to hide easily. She knows the king could have her intercepted and searched. That's happened twice already. We can be sure she does not carry it. Then where? Her banker or her lawyer. Both possible, but I doubt it. Women are secretive by nature. They prefer to keep their own secrets. She can rely on herself more than on any outsider. Besides, she means to use it soon. It must be close at hand. Most likely, it's in her own house. But it's been burgled twice. Ah, but those thieves didn't know how to search. But how will you? I won't search. What then? I'll make her show me. She'll refuse. She won't be able to. But listen, the carriage is coming. Now, follow my instructions exactly. The lamps of a carriage flashed around the corner. It pulled up to Bryony Lodge, and a crowd quickly surrounded it. A fight broke out, two loafers jostling to open the carriage door, each backed by their own supporters. A scuffle erupted, fists and sticks flying. Holmes rushed in to protect the lady, but just as he reached her, he let out a cry and dropped to the ground, blood running from his face. The crowd scattered immediately. The better-dressed bystanders rushed in to help Holmes and attend to Adler. She stood at the top of the steps, her figure framed by the light. "Is the poor gentleman badly hurt?" she asked. "He's dead," came cries from the crowd. "No, no, he may survive," others shouted. "But he won't last if left out in the street." "He's a brave man," someone said. "They'd have robbed her without him." "He's breathing still," another added. "He can't stay here. May we bring him in, ma'am?" "Yes, of course. Bring him into the sitting-room. There's a comfortable sofa," she said kindly. Solemnly, Holmes was carried into Bryony Lodge. I watched from my post by the window. The lamps were lit, blinds left open, so I could see Holmes lying on the couch. Shame pressed upon me then, conspiring against such a remarkable woman, so gracious with the injured man. But my loyalty to Holmes held firm. I steeled myself, concealed the smoke rocket in my coat, and reminded myself, we were not harming her, only preventing her from harming another. After a while, Holmes sat up, pretending to need fresh air. A maid rushed to open the window. When Holmes raised his hand, I threw the rocket in and shouted, "Fire!" The spectators took up the cry, and smoke filled the room. Through the haze, I glimpsed Adler rush through the sitting-room, panicking on her face. Holmes assured the crowd that it was a false alarm, and I slipped away to the street corner. 10 minutes later, Holmes joined me, satisfied. "You did well, Doctor. Everything went perfectly. Did you get the photograph? I know where it is." "How?" "She showed me, just as I predicted. I'm still confused. It's simple. Everyone on the street tonight was in on the act. When the fight broke out, I used a bit of red paint to fake an injury and create a scene. They brought me inside, right where I needed to be. The panic of fire drives people to rescue what matters most. In this case, Adler rushed straight to the hiding place to protect the photograph. I saw her open a panel above the right bell pull. She had it in her hand for a second, long enough for me to spot its location. When I announced it was a false alarm, she put it away and left the room. I made my excuses and got out, deciding not to grab the photograph then, as the coachman was watching closely. A premature move could ruin everything. And now, our task is nearly finished. Tomorrow the King and I, along with you, should you care to join, will visit Bryony Lodge at 8 in the morning. We'll wait in the sitting-room for Adler, But most likely, by the time she arrives, neither we nor the photograph will remain. The king would be pleased to recover it himself. And when will you go? At 8 sharp. She'll be asleep, so we'll have a clear path. Timeliness is essential, since the marriage could soon change her habits entirely. I must send a telegram to the king without delay. We reached Baker Street, and at the door, Holmes fumbled for his key. Just then, a slim youth passed by on the pavement and called out, "Good night, Mr. Sherlock Holmes." Holmes stared into the dim street. "I've heard that voice before," he murmured. "Now, who in the world could that have been?" Chapter 3. I slept at Baker Street that night, and as we were having our toast and coffee in the morning, the King of Bohemia rushed into the room. "You have really got it," he cried, grasping Sherlock Holmes by the shoulders and looking eagerly into his face. "Not yet. But you have hopes." "I have hopes." "Then come. I am impatient to be gone. We must have a cab." "No, my carriage is waiting." "Then that simplifies matters." We went downstairs and set off once more for Briony Lodge. "Irene Adler is married," remarked Holmes. "Married? When?" "Yesterday." "But to whom?" "To an English lawyer named Norton." "But she could not love him." "I am in hopes that she does." "And why in hopes?" "Because it would spare your Majesty all fear of future annoyance. If the lady loves her husband, she does not love your Majesty. If she does not love your Majesty, there is no reason for her to interfere with your Majesty's plan." "It is true. And yet, well, I wish she had been at my own station. What a queen she would have made." He fell into a moody silence, which was not broken until we arrived at Serpentine Avenue. The door of Briony Lodge was open, and an elderly woman stood on the steps. She watched us with a sardonic eye as we stepped from the carriage. "Mr. Sherlock Holmes, I believe," she said. "I am Mr. Holmes," answered my companion, looking at her with a questioning and rather startled gaze. "Indeed. My mistress told me that you were likely to call. She left this morning with her husband by the 5:15 train from Charing Cross for the Continent." "What?" Sherlock Holmes staggered back, white with chagrin and surprise. "Do you mean that she has left England? Never to return?" "And the papers?" asked the king hoarsely. "All is lost. We shall see." He pushed past the servant and rushed into the drawing-room, followed by the king and myself. The furniture was scattered in every direction, with dismantled shelves and open drawers, as if the lady had hurriedly ransacked them before her flight. Holmes rushed at the bell-pull, tore back a small sliding shutter, and, plunging in his hand, pulled out a photograph and a letter. The photograph was of Irene Adler herself in an evening dress. The letter was addressed to Sherlock Holmes, Esq. to be left till called for. My friend tore it open, and we all three read it together. It was dated at midnight of the preceding night, and read as follows: "My dear Sherlock Holmes, you really did it very well. You took me in completely. Until after the alarm of fire, I had not a suspicion. But then, when I found how I had betrayed myself, I began to think. I had been warned against you months ago. I had been told that, if the king employed an agent, it would certainly be you. And your address has been given to me. Yet, with all this, you made me reveal what you wanted to know. Even after I became suspicious, I found it hard to think evil of such a dear, kind old clergyman. But, you know, I have been trained as an actress myself. Male costumes are nothing new to me. I often take advantage of the freedom which it gives. I sent John, the coachman, to watch you, ran upstairs, got into my walking clothes, as I call them, and came down just as you departed. Well, I followed you to your door, and so made sure that I was really an object of interest to the celebrated Mr. Sherlock Holmes. Then I, rather imprudently, wished you good night, and started for the temple to see my husband. We both thought the best resource was flight when pursued by such a formidable antagonist, so you will find the nest empty when you call tomorrow. As to the photograph, your client may rest in peace. I love and am loved by a better man than he. The king may do what he will without hindrance from one whom he has cruelly wronged. I keep it only to safeguard myself, and to preserve a weapon which will always secure me from any steps which he might take in the future. I leave a photograph which he might care to possess, and I remain, dear Mr. Sherlock Holmes, very truly yours, Irene Norton, née Adler. What a woman! Oh, what a woman! Cried the King of Bohemia, when we had all three read this letter. Did I not tell you how quick and resolute she was? Would she not have made an admirable queen? Is it not a pity that she was not on my level? From what I have seen of the lady, she seems, indeed, to be on a very different level than your Majesty, said Holmes coldly. I am sorry that I have not been able to bring your Majesty's business to a more successful conclusion. On the contrary, my dear sir, cried the king, nothing could be more successful. I know that her words are inviolate. The photograph is now as safe as if it were in the fire. I am glad to hear your Majesty say so. I am immensely indebted to you. Pray tell me how I can reward you. This ring. He slipped an emerald snake ring from his finger and held it out on the palm of his hand. Your Majesty has something which I should value even more highly, said Holmes. You have to name it. This photograph. The king stared at him in amazement. Irene's photograph, he cried. Certainly, if you wish it. I thank your Majesty. Then there is nothing more to be done in the matter. I have the honour to wish you a very good morning. He bowed, and turning away without observing the hand which the king had stretched out to him, he set off in my company for his chambers. And that was how a great scandal threatened to affect the kingdom of Bohemia, and how the best plans of Mr. Sherlock Holmes were beaten by a woman's wit. He used to make merry over the cleverness of women, but I have not heard him do it of late, and when he speaks of Irene Adler, or when he refers to her photograph, it is always under the honourable title of the woman.